is coalescing around some form of legislation to that extent. I just wonder your thoughts on that. After the debate that we've heard on potentially tightening regulations that appears to be going nowhere, the Fed taking its own course, should there be a punitive piece of legislation for executives who watch their banks fail?
I think it's reasonable to look at the punitive measure. I think the question, though, is does that actually address the underlying problem, which sure looks like the regulators were asleep at the switch. It appears that the regulators had the tools in the toolkit that they needed, but failed to act in a timely manner when we entered a period of higher interest rates. I don't have a problem raising the punitive measure on bank leadership, but I don't know that at the end of the day that solves the problem of the fact that these banks were making decisions that maybe the regulators should have stepped in earlier than they did.
Well, on the subject of regulation, earlier today in the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Elizabeth Warren had some choice words for Chairman Powell in particular on this issue, and she shared some of her thoughts on this with Bloomberg. Just take a listen.
Chair Powell is the one who lobbied to weaken the regulations. He is the one who oversaw the regulations actually being undermined at the Fed, and he is the one who is responsible for the banking supervisors who were asleep at the job.
So that's putting the blame maybe on one individual, but on the subject of supervision more broadly at the Fed, your colleague on House Financial Services, Congressman Byron Donalds, a fellow Republican, to me yesterday suggested that maybe the Fed shouldn't still have this supervisory role in addition to the monetary policy one. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, I think we want to make sure we're careful here that we don't jump the gun. The Fed on the whole has done a good job in regulation. In this instance, I think there's a lot of questions as to what went wrong, and it sure seems like maybe they were asleep at the switch. And when you hear Elizabeth Warren come in and ask for more regulation and progressives like her doing the same, I think it's really a point of pause to reflect that in large part the banks that failed because of dramatically higher interest rates, which were fighting inflation. And again, Democratic one-party control, massive spending got us here in the first place. So I don't think it's that we're at a loss that progressive Democrats like Elizabeth Warren are looking to find the blame with more and to solve it with more regulation.
Congressman, I want to ask you about business in the House. It's been an interesting week. Last evening, we saw the censure vote for Adam Schiff. We saw Congresswoman Lauren Boebert put forth articles of impeachment for Joe Biden. And we even saw a blockade in the last couple of weeks by members of the Freedom Caucus who are not happy with the debt ceiling deal that Speaker McCarthy struck with President Biden. Are we going to see progress in this House in terms of continued legislation, or is there a deadlock facing the center in the months ahead?
This is a long family car trip with 222 Republicans that have got to get it done at the end of the day. I think what we've shown is time and again, we've been able to get it done when it matters. We're able to get Kevin McCarthy Speaker. Sure, it took 15 ballots, and at the end of the day, we were able to get a debt ceiling done. The next big task in front of us is the appropriations bills. That's not just the top line number about how much we're spending, but also what we're spending it on. We're going to buck some heads. We're going to have lots of tough conversations on this, but I do believe at the end of the day, we'll be able to get the appropriations bills done here in Congress.
So a long family road trip, I believe, Congressman, you've previously described the House to me as a Thanksgiving dinner with hundreds of people, and when you have that many people, there's bound to be disagreements. But how can you take advantage of having the majority with this kind of discord? Must pass bills, sure, but what about other priorities?
We're going to have a lot of discord, but at the end of the day, only so many major pieces of legislation are going to be signed into law. In a period of time of divided government like we're in right now, there's only so many bills that are going to be signed between Republicans in the House, Democrats in the Senate, and President Joe Biden. We did it with the debt ceiling. I think the appropriations bills before us are the next big task. We have a farm bill, FISA, and a handful of other pieces of legislation that have an opportunity to be signed into law. I don't know that we're going to see much more legislation than that. That's unfortunate in some ways, but that's also the reality here in Washington right now.
Well, as that car trip continues here, that road trip, Congressman, who's the parent in the front seat who slams on the brakes to turn around and yell at the kids? Is that going to be you, or is Speaker McCarthy up to the job?
there's a good handful of us that actually want to govern this country, to make sure that we're moving the country in the right direction, opportunity to grow the economy, save taxpayers money. Speaker McCarthy, I think overall has done a great job leading this conference. We're more united than we appear sometimes. That doesn't mean that at times we're not going to have some of these family conversations like we were if we were at a Thanksgiving dinner table, as Kayleigh said, I've said before. But at the end of the day, I think this conference remains united, comes together, and can get the job done on the big tasks in front of us.
Congressman, thanks for being with us. Congressman Brian Stile of Wisconsin, it's always our pleasure to have you on Bloomberg. Coming up, we continue the conversation on Prime Minister Modi's visit here to Washington and regulating artificial intelligence. We'll talk about it with Congresswoman Haley Stevens. That's next on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg.
Here's to a refreshing break. Here's to unleashing the fizzy excitement and to easy flowing conversation. Reuniti, the refreshing, sweet, and easy to drink Italian wine. Reunite with delight.
Germs can spread through touch. Use Dettol every day. It protects from 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol, assured protection every day.
strategic partner for us, particularly in that region. We need to be working with India every day.
This is a country that is important. We have made it part of the Quad. We think it's very important in the Indo-Pacific. It is an important part of meeting our China challenge.
They're the most important nation in the region that can serve as a counterbalance to China. And the decision they're going to be making every single day for the next 10 years is, do we get closer to China or do we get closer to the United States of America? I would not want our leaders to make the mistake of pushing them towards China.
Lawmakers speaking with Bloomberg earlier today on Capitol Hill on the importance of the relationship between India and the U.S. A big topic today here in Washington. Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens of Michigan. Congresswoman, thanks for being back here. There's talk about shifting from China to India, and I just wonder, from your view, is it possible to replace our economic relationship with China with India?
Well, I'm very enthusiastic about the U.S.-India relationship as the two largest democracies in the world, and as a member of Congress who represent